I know a bit of poetry and I know it by heart. So I'm not going to read anything. I'm just going to share it with you, whatever little I know. It's a miscellany. I mean, it's not, there's no thought behind it. In a certain sense, I mean, this whole thing is very unreal. I mean, for me, being here and, participating in extraordinary events. So this session is an impromptu thing. It is not something that we have planned a long time ago. Just thoughts come to my mind and I'll share them with you. In respect of the lack of reality, unreality, let me start with a couplet by the great Ghalib. Ghalib said at one point of time, generally we know Ghalib from all kinds of, ghazals of his which have been sung, recited. But let's listen to this with some care. Hasti ke mat fareb mein aa jaiyo asad. He says, Hasti ke mat fareb mein aa jaiyo asad, alam tamam halqae dame khayal hai. Meaning what? Do not be deceived by what we see. Hasti ke mat fareb mein, do not be deceived by this. All that we see, you and I, is but one loop in the great net of imagination. देखिए, net of imagination, माया की बात है, right? The great net of imagination, दाम ख्याल, ख्याल का दाम जो एक से net है, उसका एक loop है, what you and I are seeing. So I have lots, you'll tire yourself, listening to me, but I can keep you engaged for nearly an hour without any text in front of me. Depends, your patience, not my energy. The day before yesterday, I made a presentation, and in which I showed a painting of an old man, a Mughal painting, who's a pilgrim, you can call him. He just cannot stand by himself, has to support himself on a staff, and his neck is hunched forward like this, and he's looking at something which he cannot see. That painting was a Jahangiri painting, early 17th century, by Abul Hasan, one of the great painters of India. And each time, I tell you this, each time I see that painting, I am able mentally to cross a distance space of 400 years and think of a poem by one of the greatest poets of this subcontinent, Ali Sardar Jafri. Ali Sardar Jafri wrote a poem, it must have been the result of some tragic sorrow thing and so on. It's called Mera Safar, My Journey. First he describes death, then rebirth, and then he talks about what it is all about, what is my life or life in general is all about. Just listen to this description of death. I'll translate it to the best as I can. Translation, as T.S. Eliot said, is like looking at the reverse of an embroidery. You get some idea of what it is on the other side, but not all of it. He says, फिर एक दिन ऐसा आएगा, आँखों के दिए बुझ जाएंगे, हाथों के कमल कुमलाएंगे. A day will come when the lamps of my eyes will grow dim, and when the lotuses of my hand will begin to wilt. Description of death. फिर एक दिन ऐसा आएगा, आँखों के दिए बुझ जाएंगे, हाथों के कमल कुमलाएंगे, और बरगे ज़ुबान से नुत्क़ो सदा की हर तितली उड़ जाएगी. And from the tongue, that is a branch of some tree, all butterflies of speech and articulation will fly away one by one by one. बरगे ज़ुबान, और बरगे ज़ुबान से हर तितली उड़ जाएगी एक काले समंदर की तह में, फूलों की तरह से खिलती हुई, कलियों की तरह से हंसती हुई सारी शक्लें खो जाएंगी. At the bottom of a dark, deep ocean, all the faces that I see, all the smiles that I am pleased by, they will all disappear one day. दिल की धड़कन, खून की गर्दिश, सब रागिनियां सो जाएंगी. All the melodies that I hear. And what are the melodies that I hear? The coursing of blood through my veins, the beating of my heart, they will all fall silent. यादों के हसीं बुत खाने से हर शक्ल उठा दी जाएगी. मेरी धरती, मेरी ज़मीं, हंसती हुई ये हीरे की कनी, इसकी सुबहें, इसकी शामें, एक मुश्ते गुबारे इंसान पर शबनम की तरह रो जाएंगी. तब कोई नहीं ये पूछेगा. And then nobody is going to turn around and ask, सरदार कहाँ है महफिल में? Where is this man gone? His name was Sardar Ali Sardar Jafri. And then he says in the second part, लेकिन मैं यहाँ फिर आऊँगा. लेकिन मैं यहाँ, in Islam there is no rebirth. But he, believes in the fact that I'll be back here. लेकिन मैं यहाँ फिर आऊँगा, बच्चों के दहन से बोलूँगा, चिड़ियों की ज़ुबान में गाऊँगा, और जब बीज उगेंगे धरती में और कोंपलें अपनी उंगली से मट्टी की तहों को छेड़ेंगी, मैं पत्ती पत्ती कली कली फिर अपनी आँखें खोलूँगा. But I'll be back here again. मैं बच्चों के दहन से बोलूँगा. I'll speak through the lisping tongue of the newborn. And when little shoots tease the surface of the soil with their fingers, I will emerge, look around, take dewdrops on the palm of my hand and see what weight do they have. मैं पत्ती पत्ती कली कली फिर अपनी आंखें खोलूँगा, सरसब्ज हथेली पर लेकर शबनम के क़तरे तोलूँगा. मैं रंगे हिना आहंग गज़ल अंदाज़ सकुन बन जाऊँगा और रुखसारे उरू से नौ की तरह हर आंचल से छन जाऊँगा. I'll turn into the blush on the cheek of the newlywed bride. I'll look through the veils that she wears, for instance, and so on and so forth. I'll become the rhythm in the speech that people serve use and so on. मैं रंगे हिना, I'll turn into the color of mehndi, of what is hina, and so on. मैं रंग हिना आहंग गज़ल अंदाज़ सकुन बन जाऊँगा, रुखसारे उरू से नौ की तरह हर आंचल से छन जाऊँगा. और जाड़ों की हवाएं दामन में जब फसल ख़िज़ां को लाएंगी, रहरो के जवां कदमों के तले सूखे हुए पत्तों से मेरे चलने की सदाएं आएंगी. When autumn comes and leaves fall and they dry up, and when there's a crunching sound of young feet walking on them, it'll be not anybody else, it'll be my feet that you will hear the sound of. आकाश की नीली सब झीलें, आकाश की नीली सब झीलें, धरती की सुनहरी सब नदियाँ हस्ती से मेरी भर जाएंगी. तब सारा ज़माना देखेगा हर किस्सा मेरा अफसाना है, हर आशिक है सरदार यहाँ, हर माशूका सुल्ताना है. All the lakes, blue lakes that are in the skies, all the golden rivers that flow in my land will be filled with my presence. All stories which will be told will be my stories. And then the world will see that every lover bears my name, every beloved the name of my wife, Sultana. मैं, हर किस्सा मेरा अफसाना है, हर आशिक है सरदार यहाँ, हर माशूका सुल्ताना है. And then towards the end, he says, मैं एक गुरेज़ा लम्हा हूँ, मैं एक गुरेज़ा लम्हा हूँ अय्याम के अफ़सों खाने में, मैं एक लरज़ता क़तरा हूँ मसरूफ़ सफ़र जो रहता है माज़ी की सुराही के दिल से मुस्तक़बल के पैमाने में. I'm what? But a fugitive moment of time, of moment in the wonder house of time that is there. मैं एक गुरेज़ा लम्हा हूँ अयाम के अफसूं खाने में मैं एक लरस आई एम लाइक ए drop trembling at the lip of the carafe of the past about to be poured into the goblet of future. मैं एक लरसता कतरा हूँ. I'm just trembling there and the absolutely tip of it. मैं एक लरसता कतरा हूँ which is constantly traveling from the carafe of the past into the goblet of future. मैं सोता हूँ और जागता हूँ और जाग के फिर सो जाता हूँ. I sleep, I wake up, then I go to sleep again. सदियों का पुराना खेल हूँ मैं. I belong to centuries. This game has gone on forever. मैं मर के अमर हो जाता हूँ. I do not die. I become free of mortality. That is Ali Sardar. I think one of the greatest poems of our times. Like that. You know, generally speaking, we think of Urdu poetry as only a question of lover and beloved, of bees and this and that and so on, of paimana and sharab and this and that and so on. But they're extraordinary things. Last evening, I was sitting with Faisal and Shabana and I recited a poem for them by the name of a poet is very little known and a great poet by the name of Fikr Tonsvi. Really obscure, I mean, but an extraordinary. And we were talking about what this world has come to. The poem is by Fikr Tonsvi and it's extraordinarily thoughtful. It's titled Marajat. Marajat means vapisi. I want to go back. The state of mind of modern man who's achieved remarkable things but wants to go back. First he describes what I have achieved. महसूस किया मैंने सितारों का तनफ्फुस. I'm one who was able to feel the breathing of the stars. देखिए, breathing of stars. महसूस किया मैंने सितारों का तनफ्फुस, मालूम किए मैंने बहारों के दफीने, बादल में लचकती हुई बूंदों को टटोला, रोके हैं बहकती हुई किरणों के सफीने, नोची हैं अंधेरों की अलम पोश रदाएं, छेड़े हैं उजालों के झलकते हुए सीने. I was able to discover where the springs bring their treasures from. मैंने मालूम किए मैंने बहारों के दफीने. बादल में लचकती हुई बूंदों को टटोला. Before the raindrops fell on the earth, I was able to feel their texture up in the air. बादल में लचकती हुई बूंदों को टटोला. रोके हैं बहकती हुई किरणों के सफीने. All these rays that are up there and so on, they were like boats which had been lost on the high seas, and I stopped them. Achievement. Whether scientific, technological, mental, or whatever it is. रोके हैं बहारों के रोके हैं भटकती हुई रूहों के सफीने, नोची हैं अंधेरों की अलम पोश रदाएं. The veils of darkness I've removed one by one by one. और छेड़े हैं उजालों के छलकते हुए. And I've been able to fondle the firm breasts of light. Something. बट फिर कहता है पर अब के मुझे लाया है वहाँ जादुए अशाम जब मुझसे मेरा जहन संभाला नहीं जाता. बट द वंडर ऑफ टाइम हैज ब्रॉट मी अप टू अ पॉइंट वेयर आई कैन नॉट कंट्रोल दिस. मुझसे मेरा जहन संभाला नहीं जाता. कांटा सा खटकता है ख्यालों की तहों में जो इल्म की पोरों से निकाला नहीं जाता. This kind of a thorn which is pricking me from under the layers of thought and so on and so forth. And knowledge, wisdom is unable to pull that thorn from its base. कांटा सा खटकता है। ख्यालों की तहों में जो इल्म की पोरों से निकाला नहीं जाता, होंठों पे तड़प बोसाए मंजिल की है, लेकिन आगे है वो कोहरा जो उजाला नहीं जाता। आई वॉन्ट टू किस द थ्रेशोल्ड ऑफ सक्सेस, बोसाए मंजिल, होंठों पे तड़प बोसाए मंजिल की है, लेकिन आगे है वो कोहरा, but there's a fog which is surrounding me on all sides and I can't penetrate it. आगे है वो कोहरा जो उजाला नहीं जाता, बल खा के बड़ी आती हैं तीरों की लकीरें। The arrows that I shot are turning back on me. The arrows that I shot and they are turning, बल खा के बड़ी आती हैं तीरों की लकीरें, जैसे किसी छेड़ी हुई नागन का तनाव, as if there was some she serpent were lying quietly and I touched it and it just like this is फूंकार मार रही है, जैसे किसी छेड़ी हुई नागन का तनाव, रह भी नहीं सकता इन्हें सह भी नहीं सकता, चोटें ये तफक्कुर की तदब्बुर के ये घाव, I can't bear it and yet I can't leave it. रह भी नहीं सकता, इन्हें सह भी नहीं सकता, चोटें ये तफक्कर की तदब्बुर के ये घाव. It's all these sort of a constant beating of on my back by statesmanship and by wisdom of all kinds and so on. I cannot bear it anymore. कुछ भी हो. He's talking about the fog which is surrounding him. आगे है कोहरा जो उजाला नहीं जाता. कुछ भी हो, he says, अलाओ कोई शोला कोई दीपक. He says to his companions, friends and so on, you are, who are the gods of iron and fire and so on and so forth. कुछ भी हो, bring some light, some allow, some campfire, some light of a lamp or something like that. कुछ भी हो, अलाओ कोई शोला कोई दीपक, इस कोहरे की सीली हुई आंखों में जलाओ. The moist eyes of this fog and so on, इसमें जलाओ. They put some light in these. वरना, if you can't do it for me, वरना मुझे ले जाओ उन्हीं ख्वाब गहों में. Otherwise take me back to those dreamy times when my heart used to beat in universe, in unison with the universe. Just that. Go back. Marajat, Vapisi. Fikr Tansvi is an extraordinary poet and very little known. The other day, we were at some party in Delhi and Javed Akhtar was inaugurating and I was lecturing or something like that. And Javed, is a very, very, worldly wise and very bright man. तो जावेद से मेरी बात हो रही थी तो मैंने जावेद से कहा कि साहब ये आपने जो अभी whatever you recited a short while ago, it reminded me of Fikr Tansvi. He said, what? I said, Fikr Tansvi. He says, no, was he a poet? My father used to know him very well. He wrote satirical sort of essays and Pyaz ke Chilke in Pratap or Milap or something like that and so on and so forth. He said, I didn't even know that he was a poet. I said, I'm surprised and I'm disappointed. But this is what Fikr is capable of writing, this kind of poetry. His satire on the caste system is an astonishing thing, absolutely astonishing thing. दूधिया चांद में फिर डाले गए चार शगाफ और तड़पने लगी बटने लगी सीमी करने, मातमी आंसू बराए फिजा में फड़के, खाक व अफलाक के मासूम कलेजे धड़के, एक के चार शुआओं का शिकारी बोला. The hunter of light said, I split it into 4 castes. ये जवान ये ब्राह्मण है, ब्रह्मा का मुक़द्दस फर्जंद, this pious, the sacred son of Brahma. ये जवान क्षत्रिय, this is a kshatriya, warrior, शमशीर हुकूमत का धनी, इज एक्सपर्ट इन swordsmanship and so on. और ये वैश सरमायो दौलत का खुदावंद गनी, द मास्टर ऑफ ऑल वेल्थ दैट इज अराउंड लाइक अ कुबेर एंड सन. और ये शूदर है, और ये शूदर है कफश बोस कफश दोज गुलाम. एंड दिस इज अ शूद्र kissing people's feet, carrying their shoes on his head, a slave. Shudro, bolo Mahagyani Manu Dev ki jai. It's an extraordinary poem. Extraordinary poem. Manu Maharaj, तेरी रूह मुअज़्ज़म को सलाम, शोभदाबाज तेरे शहर मुनज़्ज़म को सलाम, तेरे इदराक के हर पेच को हर खम को सलाम, तेरी इस तफरक़ात पर दाज़िए आदम को सलाम. And he just railing against Manu Maharaj like this. I bow to your the twists and turns of your mind by which you split a kind of a unified light into 4 segments and so on of castes. लेकिन अब देख, then he says to Manu Maharaj, लेकिन अब देख वो एक शोलाए तेशाए खून रंग उठा. But see, I mean, there is an axe which time has taken into its own hand. अब तो हम तेरे फसूं, तेरे शिकंजों के सनम, दूधिया चांद की उस वहदत नूरी की कसम, तोड़ ही डालेंगे अब और नहीं सह सकते. Like that. Extraordinary, energy and anger and all this put together. I'm very self-conscious about this whole thing. I mean, I'm really imposing myself because this session was not thought of by me. It came out, then it was cancelled, it's now on again, but something like this. I'm enjoying it as long as you are surviving it. Another 5 minutes? 5 minutes. Faiz. Faiz is not the flavor of the season, not in my country, but an extraordinary poet. I mean, I'm sure all of you know Faiz by heart. I mean, something like this and so on. The most commonly, repeated rubais of his, Raat, he's a romantic at heart. Raat यूं दिल में तेरी खोई हुई याद आई, जैसे वीराने में चुपके से बाहर आ जाए. Your memory, I mean, thoughts of you came back to my heart last night suddenly, unexpectedly, as if in the wilderness suddenly spring has come. जैसे वीराने में चुपके से बाहर आ जाए, जैसे सहराओं में हौले से चले बादे नसीम, जैसे बीमार को बेवजह करार आ जाए. Looks as if in the hot wind, in the hot Sahara, the desert, a sudden sort of a morning breeze is cooling everything off. And जैसे बीमार को बेवजह करार आ जाए, somebody who's sick and suddenly starts feeling calm. This is what your memory does to me. रात यूं दिल में, last night, यूं दिल में तेरी खोई हुई याद. I had lost your memory, but it suddenly came back to me. जैसे वीराने में चुपके से बाहर आ जाए, जैसे सहराओं में हौले से चले बादे नसीम, जैसे बीमार को बेवजह करार आ जाए. When he was imprisoned, and he was imprisoned not once but several times, and then he's angry, really is angry, and he burst out. सजे तो कैसे सजे कत्लेआम का मेला, किसे बुलाएगा मेरे लहू का वावेला, मेरे नज़ार बदन में लहू ही कितना है. Who's going to enjoy this sort of massacre that you are planning? Where is all this blood which is going to flow? Will you be able to see it? And even if you try, he says, मेरे नज़ार में, I am just a sunken, I mean a shrunk man. It doesn't have too much blood that you can enjoy the sight of. Hazar karo mere tan se, but he says, हजर करो मेरे तन से ये सम का दरिया है, but avoid me, don't come near me, because my body, through my body runs a river of poison. ये सम का दरिया है, हजर करो मेरे तन से ये सम का दरिया है, हजर करो कि मेरा तन वो चोबे सहरा है, जिसे जलाओगे तो सहने चमन में दहकेंगे, बजाए सर्वो समन मेरी हड्डियों के बबूल. Just imagine the kind of image that he has in his mind. I am like a tree in a desert, and my body is like the wood of that particular tree. If you burn it, then instead of the flowers that bloom everywhere and so on, Bajai har, you will see a tree made of my bones standing there like this. Extraordinary poetry. And then when he asks people to join him in protesting against the censorships and so on of his own time. Chashme-nam jane shorida kafi nahi. It's not enough to have moisture in your eyes. These are all token things. Chashme-nam jane shorida kafi nahi. Tohmate ishq poshida kafi nahi. I mean that you are being, prosecuted for this, for us. Love that is secret, that you were born in your heart and so on. तोहमत इश्क़ पोशीदा काफ़ी नहीं, आज बाजार में पा बजौला चलो, खाक बरसर चलो, खूब बदामा चलो, मस्त रक़्सा चलो, दस्त अफ़शा चलो, राह तकता है सब, शहर जाना चलो. He says, we don't just silently cry in a corner and so on. It's a time to step out. Time to step out. Bazaar mein, and then with a spring in your steps, move. He's asking his colleagues and so on and so forth. Protest. Be vocal. आज बाजार में पा बजौला चलो, खाक बरसर चलो, even with this dust in your hair. खूब बदामा चलो, if the stains of blood on the wrap that you wear. खूब बदामा चलो. मस्त रक़्सा चलो, but sing and dance on the street. राह तकता है सब शहरे जाना चलो. That place where you have want to go is waiting for you to arrive there. खाक मजलिस ख़ास भी, मजमा हाकम ख़ास भी, मजमा आम भी, तीर इल्ज़ाम भी, संग दुश्नाम भी. Shakespeare, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, right? They're all waiting for it. मजमा ख़ास भी, हाकम शहर भी, तीर इल्ज़ाम भी, संग दुश्नाम. इनका दमसाज अपने सिवा कौन है, अरे शहर जाना में अब बासफ़ा कौन है. Who's going to feed them? Who's going to talk to these people, these things which are waiting for something to change? शहर जाना में अब बासफ़ा कौन है? Who's the virtuous in this whole crowd and so on and so forth? शहर जाना में अब बासफ़ा कौन है? दस्ते क़ातिल के शायां रहा कौन है? Who's worthy of being sacrificed? Hardly anyone. रख़्स दिल बांध लो. He says, let's tie up things that we will carry with us on a journey. रख़्स दिल बांध लो. जहाँ फिगारो चलो. If you are willing to sacrifice your life, then राह तकता है सब शहरे जाना चलो. This world is waiting for you to move, protest, raise your voice. And Faiz is an extraordinary poet. Extraordinary. वो दुआ वसल वाले. A phenomenal thing. Absolutely phenomenal. The organizers are looking a little anxious. नहीं वक्त हो गया था. मैं थोड़ा सा, just a little bit more. क्या सुनाऊँ आपको? Mir Taqi Mir. Mir Taqi Mir was a great poet. Urdu was not called Urdu all the time. The early word for Urdu was Rekhta. तो रेख्ता के तुम ही उस्ताद नहीं हो, गाले पहले हैं, सुनते हैं अगले ज़माने में कोई मीर भी था, ऐसा है ना. तो मीर was a great poet. I mean, preceded Ghalib, of course, and so on. तो मीर का कल एक शेर, I mean, I recited one couplet of his yesterday, and maybe just a few stray couplets from here there. And one extraordinary couplet. मुंह ताका करे है जिस तिसका, मुंह ताका करे है जिस तिसका, हैरती है ये आईना किसका. This mirror is now looking at that face and this face and is constantly asking itself the question, who do I belong to? मुंह ताका करे जिस जिसका, हैरती है ये आईना किसका. Mir is some people regard him as higher than Ghalib, and one of the great writers of our times, he has said that he is the first of poets, absolutely right at the top. And you know the story of Mir Taqi Mir. You know, Delhi was destroyed, 1739, the attack of Nadir Shah. Delhi was in ruin, right? Delhi. And he landed up in Lucknow, where the Nawab was able to offer him some patronage and so on. And he was sitting like a poor man in a corner. Nobody really recognized him. And some people in that Mashaira, which is a poetical symposium, pointed out, "Aap sahab kaun hai? Who are you?" I mean, somebody else. And then he, filbadi, impromptu, he composed this and recited this. And it's one of the most famous sort of utterances of Mir. क्या बूदो बाज पूछो हो पूरब के साकिनो. Purab ke sakin means you who live in the east, which means Lucknow. Yeah, what are you asking me? Budo Bash, kahan rehte the? Where did you live? And where do you live now? And so on. क्या बूदो बाश पूछो हो पूरब के साकनो, हमको गरीब जान के हंस हंस को पुकार के. दिल्ली जो एक शहर था आलम में इंतखाब. The city called Delhi was once the choicest city in the entire world. दिल्ली जो एक शहर था आलम में इंतखाब रहते थे जहाँ मुंतखब सब रोजगार के. Where the most skilled of all craftsmen, the most learned of all poets and used to live and so on. So उसको फलक ने लूट के वीरान कर दिया. The gods that are up there in the skies, they have looted it. They have completely destroyed. हम रहने वाले हैं उसी उजड़े दयार के. So if you ask me where I come from that particular city. And he was in love with Delhi, in love with the city of Delhi. दिल्ली के न थे कूचे और आखे मुसव्विर थे. They were not the streets of Delhi. दिल्ली के न थे कूचे. It was like the sketchbook of an artist. दिल्ली के न थे कूचे और आखे मुसव्विर थे. जो शक्ल नजर आई तस्वीर नजर आई. Whatever I saw was like a painting in itself. When Mir Taqi Mir is ghazal हैं उसकी बहुत सारी and so on, like this. I think in decency I should withdraw. Thank you.
अमृता प्रीतम सुना दीजिए.
अमृता प्रीतम.
वही जो आज रखा है वो.
हाँ, वो सारी तो नहीं मुझे याद है थोड़ी सी.
याद है आपको, मैं आपको निकाल के
Amrita Pritam, you know, I mean, great poet, Punjabi, and at the time of describing the devastation that the partition brought and so on. And she's remembering at that time one of the great poets of of Punjab, Waris Shah, who wrote the famous Heer. Waris Shah's Heer is one of the great classics of Indian literature, and is sung by on every sort of occasion, or not on any occasion, but everywhere. Heer is Heer. And then when she sees the devastation around and so on, Aj Aakhan Waris Shah nu ut kabran vichon bol. Now I'm addressing you, Waris Shah. You are lying in a grave. Sorry. ਅੱਜ ਆਖਾਂ ਵਾਰਿਸ ਸ਼ਾਹ ਨੂੰ ਉੱਠ ਕਬਰਾਂ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਬੋਲ ਤੇ ਅੱਜ ਕਿਤਾਬੇ ਇਸ਼ਕ ਦਾ ਕੋਈ ਨਵਾਂ ਵਰਕਾ ਫੋਲ, that story of love, and ਕੋਈ ਦੂਜਾ ਵਰਕਾ ਫੋਲ, and turn the page and compose something or read something from it. ਇੱਕ ਰੋਈ ਸੀ ਧੀ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੀ, ਤੂੰ ਲਿਖ ਲਿਖ ਮਾਰੇ ਵੈਣ, ਅੱਜ ਲੱਖਾਂ ਧੀਆਂ ਰੋਂਦੀਆਂ ਤੈਨੂੰ ਵਾਰਿਸ ਸ਼ਾਹ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿਣ, ਓਏ ਦਰਦਮੰਦਾਂ ਦਾ ਦਰਦਿਆ ਉੱਠ ਤੱਕਣ ਪਨਾ ਪੰਜਾਬ, ਅੱਜ ਬੇਲੇ ਲਾਸ਼ਾਂ ਵਿਛੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਲਹੂ ਦੀ ਭਰੀ ਚਨਾਬ, ਅੱਜ ਸਭੇ ਕੈਦੋ ਬਣ ਗਏ ਹੁਸਨ ਇਸ਼ਕ ਦੇ ਚੋਰ, ਹੁਣ ਕਿੱਥੋਂ ਲਿਆਈਏ ਲੱਭ ਕੇ ਵਾਰਿਸ ਸ਼ਾਹ ਇੱਕ ਹੋਰ. Like that. Very deeply pained and so on. So appeals, to Waris Shah, who died about 250 years ago, something like that. That there is nobody who can compose like you, catch the pain of this particular.